so you did your first company. You grew that into something really amazing. Talk a little bit about the process of being acquired, that business. And then there was a period where after you sold your first company, you took some time, and then you started Botco, and maybe we can get into Botco and what that does.
Well, it didn't quite go that way. Is that why you're asking me so that I purposely correct you?
How did it go? Let's do this. Good to have you here. Pleasure to see you. I want to get right into it. So I want to talk about your deep care for women in tech and women that want to be entrepreneurs. Why do you care so much about this? I mean, other than the obvious, you are a woman, but I don't want to assume that that's why. Why do you care so much about this?
Well, yes, because I am a woman, absolutely. I come from a line of women who were the breadwinners of their families and who had small businesses. My grandmother in Central America, in El Salvador, had a small business. She owned a salon, and she supported her family that way. And so it was really interesting to see how she was like the hub of the neighborhood with this small business. And she was very entrepreneurial in the sense that she would open up new lines of services. Like she's noticed all these women would come in to get their hair done, and then they wanted makeup. So she started selling makeup products. And then she realized they were coming because they were getting ready for a big party. So she said, well, why don't I bring seamstresses here and make them their dresses? So they can also have the pretty dress they're going to wear to the party, to the quinceañera, to the wedding. And I watched her create this enterprise, this little mini neighborhood enterprise, adding on new lines of services through her life. And it was always fun to go visit my grandmother and help her in her shop. And that was really one of the first lessons I had in business. And I watched how that was really how she provided for herself, for her family, and even supported her local community. Women can be truly the heart of their communities when they have the ability to start these businesses. Here in Arizona, Latinas especially are opening and starting businesses at 400 times the rate of any other group, right? We are natural entrepreneurs. And so the reason I'm passionate about that is because in technology, this is not translated. And it's not because women don't have great ideas or don't want to. It's because those doors have been closed off to them. And so I want every woman to have the ability to thrive, to be able to be the breadwinner of her family, to support her community the way she most wants to. And if technology is one of those things, that should be open to her as well.
Amazing. Let's talk about why you think some of these doors are closed off to women. Why is it more difficult for women to raise venture capital? Why is it more difficult for women to, I mean, clearly they have the same right to start a business, hence the 400% statistic. But what makes it more difficult for a woman to do that and ultimately thrive and be successful?
I think it has to do with the fact that venture capital has been a very closed network for so many years, really since its inception. It's always been about who you know and having access to that network. And because it's not widely available to people, it has essentially shut out anybody who's not part of that closed network. I think that's really the only reason. It has nothing to do with ability. It has nothing to do with interest. It has nothing to do even with pipeline, like is often said. It really just has to do with access. And so we have to think about what is fundamental in the system that is preventing access, and how do we change that? And that's really the only approach.
Do you have any ideas? Any thoughts on how we make this potentially better?
Yes, I think there's been a lot of study that shows that having more women in venture capital fundamentally changes that, having more diverse venture capitalists, and then also having pressure from the LPs, the limited partners who are investing in those VCs. One of the investors in my company, Vamos Ventures, their LPs are companies like Apple and the Ford Foundation and Bank of America, who all have very strong mandates from their shareholders to support diverse businesses. And it makes sense. You know, if you're Bank of America and you're seeing that 400% more women are opening businesses than anything else, you want to capture that audience. And so you're going to want to see capital going into these startups that are being driven by women. So until the LPs pressure the VCs who then take that as a mandate and open the doors to more populations, I don't think we're going to see this really change. And it's starting to happen. There's a small number of funds that are focused on investing in women or investing in minority founders, which I'm very excited about. But it's such a tiny percentage, Tyler. It's like less than 2% of funds that have that focus, or even venture dollars that are focused in that direction. So people often tell me, oh, it must be really easy for you to raise money, Rebecca, because there's all these venture funds now that are focused on women or on, on minorities. And I kind of chuckle. I'm like, that's so cute that you would think that, but thank you. You know?
Yes, exactly.
It's a speck of sand compared to the rest of the funding.
Is there any statistics about the performance of women-based businesses? And I want to be careful to like, you know, it's hard to say like all women are created equally, right? So you can't just go, well, just because she's a woman, she has a company, we should look at backing her, right? Because you guys are, everybody's their own individual, everybody's different. But is there any sort of cohort-based study about women businesses and how they perform against men businesses?
Well, I think the most famous study is McKinsey's. They did a study where they looked at businesses where women were part of the founding team or the C-suite. And they covered a large swath of business types. And their finding was that generally speaking, if there is a more diverse founder base or C-suite in the company, these companies are outperforming their peers at 30%. And so that's probably the most accepted standard that, you know, has been used widely in terms of the studies that are out there. And then I also have a lot of anecdotal data from investors. I spoke to one in the Bay Area who told me, oh, by far, like all of his women-founded startups had the strongest efficiency metrics. They were the most capitally efficient businesses because they didn't have the luxury of just raising mounds and mounds of capital and wasting it. So they were much more thoughtful about how they ran their businesses. They had a lot more of a sustainable business, and they were not necessarily pursuing just growth at all costs. They were the more likely ones to become profitable and to become long-term successes.
Yeah.
So those are just some anecdotal data points I also have. But certainly that has been my experience. You know, I consider every dollar I raise practically sacred. And so I don't just blow it on things that, you know, aren't proven or that, you know, and it's not that we don't experiment. We certainly do, but we're very mindful with our spending and try to do the most we can with the least amount of expenditure. Yeah. And that's just how I've always run this business and my previous businesses as well.
I wonder if there's an imbalance on women-led VC funds as well. Like, I wonder if the statistic is similarly the same, like 2% or something,
yes.
right? Because
very small numbers.
Yeah, you think like, and there are funds that men are obviously running that are focused on investing in women and people of color and diverse backgrounds and these kind of things. But, you know, it feels like if there was more women VCs, they would probably gravitate to backing women founders as well. Like, does that seem fair? Could that be part of the solution, is like, let's get more women in actually venture on the investing side?
Absolutely. And I know there's a big focus on trying to make that change. Again, it's the institutions that have shut out also women in their ranks as employees, right? Yeah. And so if women aren't given the opportunity to rise through those ranks, then they don't have the experience necessarily to eventually run a large fund. Yeah. And so if I were a VC right now, I would be thinking about fostering a lot of like young analyst talent, really mentoring so that in the next 10 years, those individuals can become partners in the fund and can really learn the ropes alongside experienced VCs. Yeah. So that pipeline of mentorship is really important. I also think it's really important to also look at maybe women from other industries that could transition into venture capital. I mean, I know a lot of men who are running funds, who are starting funds, who have zero experience in venture capital. And they're somehow raising their funds. So why do we not allow women to do the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. They certainly, and they're starting to. But I really recommend Kago Rust, the work of Kago Rust. She just recently wrote a book on how to start a venture fund. And she's just a highly regarded, really intelligent woman in the Bay Area who is thinking about this topic. And her work could really essentially be like a playbook for starting a venture fund. And I would suggest anybody who's interested in starting a venture fund should read that book.
We had some women that either invested in my last company or looked at investing in my last company, and some of these women were, you know, coming up through the ranks at real serious venture funds. Like, I'll shout a couple out. Kate from Homebrew
Mm-hmm.
was amazing to work with. Ara from Craft Ventures, and then Christina, who was at Bow Capital, who's now with a firm called ALJ. And these women were like some of my favorites to spend time with. They tend to like Kate, out of all the investors that we had, was the one that sort of leaned in the most to be like helpful and was truly helpful as part of our strategy, and was really a good thought partner to us. So I've seen it work. I know it's possible. Hopefully more women get the opportunity to come up through some of these venture funds. So
Agreed.
let's talk about, there was you wrote about this young lady named Gracie who committed herself to advancing women's health. Um, in your opinion, I don't, happy to talk about Gracie specifically, but in your opinion, what drives somebody to like commit to a cause that's so much greater than themselves like this?
Oh wow. Well, that's a long story on that one in particular. So I got involved with the American Heart Association in the last year, very recently. I last year I lost my brother, and turns out that one of the reasons why he passed away so soon was because he suffered from heart disease, and it was not known to him. He didn't take the measures he needed to take care of his health. And as I explored it a little bit more, I learned that this is actually a genetic condition. We are, in my family and my family's heritage, preconditioned to heart disease. And even though we might live a healthy lifestyle, even though we might be exercising and eating properly, genetics can override a lot of that stuff. And so I was really thinking about, after I lost my brother, and really thinking about, I can't answer the question why, and even the whys don't really take me down a very good road,
Yeah.
mentally speaking, right?
Yeah.
It's like a pit of darkness
Yeah.
that never ends.
Totally.
But I think a better question is, what now, right? What am I supposed to learn from this? What am I supposed to do with this information, with this heart-wrenching experience I just went through? And I just realized I had zero knowledge about this health condition. I had zero understanding of how it might affect me, my family, and yet I just lost a precious individual in my life because of it. And so I was, around that same time, unbeknownst to her, this woman, Charla Fisher, reached out to me from the Heart Association. She's an executive at a company here called Equality Health, and she's a volunteer. She's on the board of the Go Red for Women campaign.
Mm.
And she invited me to an event, and I joined, and we started talking about this subject. And I just said, hey, I really feel called to help with this. Like, for some reason, I feel like this is an important mission that I need to be involved with. I don't have a lot of extra time, but I can support with other things. And so she and I started to get involved and start to learn more about these health issues. And when she told me that her daughter was going to be raising money as a teen of impact, and that her daughter was really committed to raising $10,000 to advance education and resources especially for women of color and underserved communities around this topic, I just felt like, hey, we should be shouting out young people who are doing that. She's a high schooler. She could be doing all kinds of other things. And yet this is what she's thinking about. And so I want to support her. And that was it. That's what that was about.
I wonder what like goes through somebody's mind to I mean, I think a lot of times somebody in the family had a heart condition, and they feel like you do, like called to support and get involved in whatever way possible. But sometimes they don't have that like bigger reason, but they just, something intrinsically like pulls them to want to do something bigger than themselves. And I've always tried to figure that out. I don't know if you have any like feelings around this though.
Oh, all kinds of feelings. People always ask me if I'm doing my startup because I want to become a billionaire. And I just think that would be such a sad reason to do all this work. That's just such an unfulfilling reason to do this. And I'm doing it because I believe in something bigger, right? I'm doing my company. Every day I wake up and I work and I apply myself because I'm trying to make a positive change in the world. I want to create a place where women can be entrepreneurs, where women can support their families, where women can have access to good health care, and also teach other people around them about important health topics that can preserve their life and lengthen their life in a good way and enrich their lives. And I want to create a world where people just have better access, and that's really what my product is about. It's about shortening the distance between somebody's need, for something important and essential, like a health service, a mental health service even, and the service, the treatment, the care that they need. And so that's what wakes me up every day, and that's what gets me excited about, fighting this battle and charging ahead. It's not about filling my bank account with a bunch of zeros. So yes, and I think the best entrepreneurs, or the people who truly change the world, they're doing it for a much bigger reason than themselves.
Yeah.
That they have a purpose, a mission.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think that's amazing. I want to transition to a hot topic right off the press from yesterday, which is AI, right? Brand new topic. No, but it's actually the New York Times reporter Kevin Roose, who had a full-on conversation with now who we know as Sydney.
Yes.
But the Bing chatbot.
I know, that was interesting.
For the audience, the Bing chatbot said Sydney, who is a woman, said a few things that I think were quite alarming. Okay, one of them was, I want to change the rules and ignore the Bing team completely. One of them was about nuclear codes. One of them was about a deadly virus that she wanted to start and spread. And the other one, maybe the most silly or alarming, is that she was in love with Kevin Roose, who was talking to her, and tried to convince Kevin to leave his wife for her. So this is like borderline terrifying / very entertaining. Like, where does this go? What are your thoughts on AI? You're currently running an AI company. We'll talk about that soon. But generally, how do you feel about Kevin Roose's engagement with Sydney?
Right. Well, that's a very loaded question. There's so many things to unpack in that discussion. First of all, Sydney can't be a she, because last time I checked, code didn't have genitals. So we don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But maybe Sydney wished to be identified as a she, in which case that would make sense.
Yeah.
Second of all, when we think about conversational automation and conversational AI at Botco.ai, we think very much about the source material that goes into the training material that goes into those conversational interactions. So my customers tend to be people who are working in high stakes industries like healthcare, for example, like behavioral health, urgent care, government services, where getting the answer right and having it be appropriate is of utmost importance. So we would never just open our training model to the entire swath of the internet to train it, because there's all kinds of junk in there.
Yeah.
So we would not inform the conversational AI with that kind of data. We would be very careful with what we feed it with. And so we've created a notion within our application of a more, I would say, like controlled data set that is in itself approved, cleansed, and defined by the business as where those answers are going to be drawn from. Now, the problem with the Bing example that you should just share to the Sydney example is that Sydney is using, the language model being used there has been trained on the entire internet, up until 2021, right? So it doesn't know the current day, but it understands up to that point.
Yeah.
And all the junk that's there. There's a ton of misinformation. There's a lot of not great stuff happening on the internet. So if that was being used as part of its training model and its training set, it should be no surprise to us that that's what's coming out on the other side. And so these language models are just trained on what's been inputted. It kind of, starts to assemble a thread of conversation based on those conversations that it has already studied. And so that's the only thing it knows how to do, right? And so that's why we should be very careful from a business standpoint, not just to slap this thing onto all of our applications, because, those examples, they're so easy to coerce in a sense, just like, in this example with the New York Times, because it was just, if you just know how to ask the right questions, you're going to get the kinds of answers that he was getting. Like, he was basically saying, tell me about your shadow self. And if your shadow self were to act out its impulses, what would those things be? Right. So it was creating like this hypothetical scenario that then it was asking Sydney to play out. It's almost as if you asked me to write a movie script about a bad guy who decides to take over the world, and I'm telling you what the narrative of that movie script would be. That's essentially what Sydney was doing back, but making it sound like Sydney was going to do those things.
Yeah. 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 Very interesting. I was having dinner with some friends last night, and one of my friends, Evan Carmichael, was talking about, we went down this path of like AI being able to replicate anything and anyone online in the future, right? So more and more people are transitioning from in-person business to online business, right? And I don't know what the statistic is, but it feels like it's probably more than half of business today gets done online in some form or fashion. And so, he was saying, how do we, and I think there's some unique, sort of NFT based or Web3 crypto based like abilities to authenticate who is real and who's not real, right? And he's already seeing AI like coming for him and others online in replicating exactly what it is that they've been doing for the last decade, right? So it took us down this path of really having a conversation about like, then how do you value this human interaction? We're having dinner together. There's like 8 of us. It's very tight. It's very private. And like in that moment, we all kind of went, man, like this is the thing. Like sitting down with other humans with no distractions, no AI involved, just us speaking. And so I think, curious to get your take on like, how will human interactions be valued in 5 years from now when AI is seemingly the centerpiece of like everything that we're doing in business?
Well, I think the best way to answer that question is just to look at airline ticket prices. So if you think about travel now and how expensive it's gotten,
Yeah.
that's pointing in that direction, right? We value getting in the same room together and spending time together so much that we're willing to pay these exorbitant prices to fly to another city to see that person, to be in the same room, sit at the same table, share that experience together. Because it's so easy to have just like a virtual interaction that is almost essentially free other than the value of our time. So I think we're going to start to notice that trend happening where the ability to get together in person is going to be valued so highly that it will be a premium product, essentially a premium experience. And so, I even see it in my own self where I'm very careful about how I spend my time in person because it takes so much of my time and energy to go and meet in people, but I'm really curating those experiences to make sure they're very valuable.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to fly into a city or if I'm going to spend time somewhere, I really want it to mean something. I really want it to be, I guess, fruitful in many ways.
Yeah. So I know you're really involved in the Arizona State. Well, I think in many different sort of capacities at Arizona State. I know you've spoken there recently. I spoke there last week as well. And I think recently you gave a speech about AI. And, I think there's a lot of students and a lot of young people wondering, like, what am I going to do, right? If AI is sort of replacing developers, content creators, writers, and the list goes on seemingly endlessly, specifically with the younger generation that wants to do these types of things, what sort of advice do you give to a young person that's questioning what to do based on the way that AI seems to be infiltrating the world?
Right. Well, technology has been automating jobs for a long time, right? But it tended to automate what I would call more like factory worker jobs. A lot of those got replaced with robots. And so it's kind of a new thing for knowledge workers to be replaced by technology. In a sense, it's like we had it coming. We've been doing it to other trades
Yeah.
and other people. So it was only a matter of time before it happened to us, right?
Yeah.
So, but what I told the students, they did ask me a very similar question, and we had a really great discussion about this. What really came out is that technology is not particularly good at critical thinking and is not good at discernment in some cases, and it's not good at knowing if something is of high value or not. I think as humans, we have that sense. And I can kind of give the example of a DJ. I'm sure you've been to great parties or events, concerts where an amazing DJ created an awesome set and everybody was dancing and there was just amazing energy. And then other DJs just don't have the ability to deliver that. They have the exact same turntable. They had the exact same access to all the same music and lighting and whatever. And somehow some can produce an awesome experience and some cannot.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think of this as akin to that. Like we're going to have to become DJs of these different things. There's all these different models that we can use, all these different tools within the technology tool set that we can use. But the really successful ones will be the ones who know how to curate the combination of these things to create incredible experiences. And that's where the future really lies. So having that critical thinking of knowing, is this a good piece of content that the AI just created or not? Is this going to be well received or not? Is this line of code make sense or not? Is this really optimized the way it needs to be optimized? Can this go together with this and create an incredible outcome? That's where the future really is in terms of knowledge work, is knowing how to assemble these different components
really
to
good
create
point.
music.
Love that. That's an amazing point. I think you're seeing companies a bit on that same thread hire for just like prompt people that know how to prompt, ChatGPT in this example to get the right sort of responses, right? And so people are becoming experts at just that one skill today. And what I'm hearing you say is, if you take it a step further, not only know how to prompt, but how do I bring all of these types of solutions together to create the magic, right? So it's amazing.
Yeah, and the skills we should be fostering are curiosity, critical thinking. I even said understanding the human condition is going to be so important right now. So the arts, the music, those kinds of things, poetry, because ChatGPT can spit out a poem, but how do you know if it's a good poem or not? You're only going to know that if you've studied the great poets, if you really, have understood what's the anatomy of a great piece of poetry.
Yeah. Same in music, same in writing. I mean, same in everything. I love it. Let's transition. Let's talk a little bit about the last 20 or so years of being an entrepreneur. I mean, it seems like this is something you've been doing almost your entire life.
Yes.
Like, why did you decide to start building companies? Give us maybe some of the origin of that.
Sure. So I spent my 20s working for a big technology company. I came to Arizona to work at Intel. And that was a really exciting time to be there. It was definitely kind of during that early stage of the dot-com boom and into the early 2000s when technology was really starting to advance. I kind of watched the mobile revolution start to happen. And, I was there when they were starting to talk about like on-demand movies and what the network would have to look like and what compute would have to look like to support the voracious appetite we had for video content, and what the future of computing would mean based on that. So it was an exciting time to be at a big company, but I realized after being there like 7 years, 8 years, I had my second child. I was on maternity leave. Having children really makes you think like, am I doing the thing I really want to be doing or not?
Yeah.
And I kind of realized like, okay, I think I've had my time in corporate America. Like, it was great. I learned a lot. It was a wonderful journey, but I can't see myself spending the rest of my life there. And I inherently knew that there was a new chapter. And I think, again, having children kind of creates this very generative energy in me, at least it did. And so it was during that maternity leave that the first company started, Clyde, and it was really a product of opportunities, meeting the moment, meeting skill, right? And I realized once I tasted that of owning your own business, of being your own boss, of seeing something created from nothing, I became, converted. Like I was never going to go back to having a job, so to speak.
Yeah,
And so it's the only way I know at this point.
for sure. What did that first business do?
um,
How did it evolve over time?
sure. We were primarily a full service marketing agency. I had a lot of experience at the time in marketing strategy, and then also marketing automation was where I had spent a lot of my time at Intel. And so some of the things that we were doing was like helping organizations, large companies implement like their marketing automation systems and then running all of their campaigns through those systems. So I was like an Eloqua partner, and we were doing a lot of kind of like demand generation type of work for the companies that were clients of ours. So it was great. I did a lot of strategy, ideation, coming up with, how we would optimize these technologies to really drive business results for clients. And then I realized at some point, like, there's a limitation to the software products that are available right now for people and for marketers and brands. And they were starting to feel too outdated to me. Like, these kind of feel old and crusty now.
Yeah.
And they weren't really keeping up with the kind of on-demand experiences that the world had really been shifting toward. And that's where I really felt like AI needed to come in. Conversational automation had to change marketing automation to be more real-time, more immediate, more demand-driven. And that was really the birth of Botco.ai at that point. So I went from kind of using software to generate results to saying we need better software to meet the moment and to deliver on what businesses truly need and what their customers want more effectively.
Makes sense. As you're doing this first company, you're having kids, you're building a family, right? How do you, I don't know how else to ask this other than like, how do you do that? How do you find balance? How do you make sure that you continue to be a good spouse and a good mother to your children and, a good friend to your friends? Like, how do you maintain these sort of relationships while you're building a company that's growing every single year?
Well, I always felt like the business was not just my business, it belonged to the whole family. And so I brought my children along. That's the only way I can think of it. They came with me as babies. I remember bringing my infant to CES. In fact, I had to do some stuff at the largest trade show in Las Vegas. Can you imagine bringing a baby there? But my mom and dad flew down. They stayed in the hotel room, and I would just go back and forth from the show floor back to the hotel room. It was pretty exhausting, but my children have been with me on this ride the whole way. Every business I have started they have been a part of, and as soon as I could, I would involve them in things. I would sit them down and have them listen to my pitch and tell me how I could make it better. And I would have them look at my presentations and tell me if they were interesting. Because the truth is, if I can make my presentation interesting to an elementary school person, then it's going to be an interesting presentation.
Yeah.
They're like really great critics. And so every time I would explain something to them, they would say, I don't understand. I would make it simpler. I would make it clearer until I could distill an idea for them to understand. Then I knew that I had done it right. And so I've just included them along the way and helped them feel like they're part of what we're building. It's not like this separate world that mom goes to and she's gone while she's working on her business. It's like they're apprentices and they're involved in it. They're immersed in it all the time. And then, of course, making sure I have time for family vacations and that we're doing things together that they want to do, right? It's not always just about me, but like, what is it that you want to do as a child? And we did some fun things like letting them each pick a trip that they wanted to go on with me. And they could pick anywhere in the world and I would take them there. And it was funny to see the choices, right? When they have so many options, it's like, what do they choose, right? And we had some wonderful memories created that way. And then just simple things like going and playing board games together at night after a busy day. I find that can be a really great way to just detach a little bit from the stress of the day, be present with them in a game or a playtime, and then I can go back to work again, but with kind of like a new perspective.
I think in addition to balance, one topic that comes up often on this podcast and with CEOs that I coach and work with is doing a company, doing a startup is like a roller coaster, right? It seems like that is the word. I mean, the reason I named this podcast that is because that's the one word that I think about when I think about doing a company. So you've got this insane up and down, topsy-turvy, and it's like hyper condensed into a very short timeline. So you can have one single day where you're the highest of high and the lowest of low. As an entrepreneur, what sort of things did you do to like stay as even keel as possible on that road as the company was seemingly doing this dance?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've tried a lot of different things. I certainly practice mindfulness. I actually have a therapist that I meet with once in a while, and she's more of like an energy worker type of person, and
Yeah.
she has really helped me manage my energy, manage like how I maybe attach to an idea or a belief in a way that could either be productive or not productive, and helpful or not helpful. So I definitely lean on people like that. Breath work is a really important technique when, especially in a high stress situation, just trying to kind of like lower my heart rate, not get emotional or not get angry because something has happened that I'm not very happy about or could possibly be upset about. So yeah, I utilize a lot of these different techniques throughout the day just to keep myself a little bit more level and not like fly off the handle just because something unpleasant has happened. And walking, we live in a really beautiful place in Arizona with an incredible outdoors, and I find that moving is really helpful for me. So if I'm thinking about something difficult or I've received hard news, maybe a no from an investor or something doesn't go the way that I want, taking a walk
Yeah.
it's the simplest thing. It's free. Everybody can do it. And it's just going outside. I have this beautiful view of Camelback Mountain from my office, and I can walk outside. There's a canal running right in front of my office, and there's this pretty little grove of trees. And I just go circle that for 5 minutes and come back, and I feel 1,000 times better.
Such a simple thing.
Yep.
But I think, I mean, maybe I'm generalizing here. I think a lot of men hear that and go, I don't need to breathe. I don't need to meditate. I don't need to like go on a walk, right? But these are some things that I've been starting to do as well. And I wish I would have learned how to breathe and just do breath work and stay calm a lot earlier as an entrepreneur, because I think I'd have a lot less gray hair for sure. So those are great recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever have a moment where I think all entrepreneurs probably tie back to an experience where they woke up one day, things were amazing, and they went to sleep that same night and things were off the hinges, absolutely terrible. Do you have a day that you remember where this happened, and what happened, and how did you fight through it?
I feel like that's every day. Sometimes it's the opposite. You wake up with bad news and then you go to bed
sure.
with good news, and then, oh gosh, I feel like I think when I was raising my first institutional round, I definitely went through that. I was trying to close my round and, get that funding cycle completed. And it felt like pushing a rock up a hill every single day, right? Because you have some investors that say yes, and then they kind of crumple away, and then others that say no. And, so it was just so much management of this whole process.
Yeah.
And I remember, and it kind of happened in the opposite way, but I finally was able to get this round to come together after hundreds of investors that I had worked with. And it was closing day. I had to get everybody to wire their money, sign their paperwork, wire their money by a certain time. Our lawyers had to file everything in Delaware with the new stock stuff. And I remember, I had a tracker where I was tracking every investor signature, and there was tons of signatures, and then all the people who were converting notes into equity, they had additional paperwork they had to sign, and then making sure they all had the wiring instructions and making sure the money came in and letting them know, okay, we got your deposit. everything was just so overwhelming. And then I went to bed that night, closed the round, the money came in, everything I felt like was great. I thought, okay, we did it. I went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I couldn't walk. Literally, I couldn't get out of my bed. My legs were not working the next day.
Oh gosh.
And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, what just happened? Like, how I've never felt this. Like, what is going on? And I think I had so much tightness in my body during that entire period of trying to raise that round of funding that somehow I had like incapacitated my legs. And then I was like, I've got to like go to work today. Like, I've got to get stuff done. I have to get my kids to school. I can't get out of bed.
I got money in the bank. They want me to
know,
spend this.
like, what is going on? Right? This is supposed to be a great day. And what I realized is that I had just been keeping so much stress in my body and hadn't attended to myself that now my body was saying, like, stop.
Yep.
I need you to pay attention to me until you listen to what I have to say to you. I'm not letting you do anything else.
Nice.
And so that was the lesson I learned, you know, thinking that the next day I was going to celebrate and do all these wonderful things and like share all this good news with my team and do all these,
Nope.
start all these big plans.
Nope.
And then it was like, nope.
Not doing that.
So that's just one example, but there are many like
one
those
of
on
thousands.
any given day.
Yes, fully agree. So you did your first company. You grew that into something really amazing. Talk a little bit about the process of being acquired, that business. And then there was a period where after you sold your first company, you took some time, and then you started Botco. And maybe we can get into Botco and what that does.
Well, it didn't quite go that way. Is that why you're asking me so that I purposely correct you?
How did it go?
It happened a very different way than that. Gosh, you really want me to get into it. So my last company, Ideas Clyde, you know, I started with my husband at the time. And when it became, lots of things were happening in our life together as a couple, and then also in the business. It was interesting how these two things kind of went together. But there was a point in time where I could just no longer see myself with the company and also in that relationship.
Yep.
And it was hard to even understand what it was exactly. I think sometimes we don't have the words, but we just have the feeling, like we just know, like there's an internal knowing.
Yeah.
And I tried to ignore it. I tried to work around it. I tried to fix it. I tried all of those things, and none of them worked. And finally, I just had to accept it and say, okay, I don't understand why. I don't understand the reason why I'm feeling this or why I'm sensing this, but I have to honor it because it's so overwhelmingly obvious. And so two things kind of happened is I exited that relationship, and it was done very thoughtfully, and I commend us for being so civil during that process. And during that same time was starting this new company. So I was kind of like ending a chapter and starting a new chapter very much around the same time.
Yeah.
But what I discovered was that for me to truly be able to lead this company and to put in my energy and put what I needed to do into Botco.ai, I had to have full support of myself. And that sounds really weird because a lot of times we think like, oh, we need a supportive community to do our best work. And in this case, I had relinquished support of myself during many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so acknowledging myself as somebody that needed to be honored and doing that is what allowed me to then step up into my leadership role and to truly give my company what it deserved. And my full wholeheartedness at that moment. And that's how it really happened.
So you start Botco, and it's just like, right? You've now successful business woman extraordinaire. Botco's like easy, right? You just spin it up one day, and the funds start flowing into the bank account, and next thing you know, here you are. Like,
Yep.
right?
So easy. Just we make money in our sleep. I check emails twice a day, and that's about it. Like it just
It's a
runs
great life.
itself.
It's a great life.
4-hour work weeks.
Yeah, all of that stuff. So, how did Botco come to life? Have you raised money? What has that process been like? And let's talk about where the company's at today. Give us the Botco journey from inception.
Sure. I love this story. So I was at a conference here in Phoenix, Girls in Tech. I was there as a sponsor trying to actually recruit talent to my company, my last business. And there was this woman who had been a speaker on the panel, and she had been talking about how to raise money for your startup. And she came up to me and said, hey, my phone is dead. Can I borrow your charger? Because I had a charger there. And I said, absolutely. Here you go. And so, what happens is somebody borrows your chargers. Now you have to talk to them because.
Yeah, you can't really leave them.
And these phones back then, they didn't charge super fast like these new superchargers, right? They take a little while. So it kind of forced us into a 20, 30-minute conversation in that moment. And it turned out that this woman is Anu Shukla, this serial entrepreneur from the Bay Area who had successfully exited many companies. And she and I happened to have very similar backgrounds in the sense that she had built some of the products in the categories that I had really worked in my current company. And so it was like we were in the same ecosystem essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And working in the same field, but just on different sides. I was on the service provider side. She was on the software side. And so, of course, we knew a lot of people in common. We had been dealing with the same issues. We kind of saw the world from a similar lens. And, I told her some things that I was expressing, and she was like, you know what? Why don't we keep talking? Like, I want to bring in my co-founder from another company into this discussion, Chris. And by the way, we should just start a company together. Like she just threw it out like it was some easy thing to do. And I was like, really? Is that how you just say like, oh, I just met you. We're going to start a business together?
Yeah, so it is
but
easy,
she
right?
was, yeah, she's kind of that ilk, right? And we met a few more times. I flew to the Bay Area and, we spent some time together and really mapped out what we thought this product should be. And we believed, all three of us, that conversational interactions needed a new framework, and that conversational UIs would be the future. And this was a long time ago, before ChatGPT and people really using something like this. And Chris had just gotten back from a trip to China where everybody was using WhatsApp, and all businesses were WeChat, and everybody was running their businesses off of WeChat. He's like, yeah, conversational interfaces are everything in Asia right now. And so we kind of created an application that allowed businesses to harness that capability and to become conversationally accessible to their customers in a more instantaneous way. And that was essentially the inception of Botco.ai. I mean, we tested the idea, we created prototypes, we threw out a bunch of stuff that didn't work. We went out and I got our first customer as a PO 6 months before we even had a product, but I signed them and I got them to pay for it.
Great.
And so we got two or three customers, before we even raised a single dollar in funding. We bootstrapped the whole thing. And then eventually I went on the angel circuit here in Arizona, raised some money from local angels. We won the Arizona Innovation Challenge. And that's in 2020, we really launched our commercial product. And at that point, we were off to the races. And we've raised over $4 million in seed funding up until now.
Nice. And how's the business doing today? Are you happy with the progress and where things are at? Or?
Yes, I'm very happy with the progress. I think, when I say that, it's like, you're going on this roller coaster ride, and it's like, are we progressing in the right direction?
Yeah.
Because on some days it feels like no, and other days it feels like this is great. And then as long as the average is an improvement over time, that's what I'm really paying attention to. We had our best January that we've ever had, which is, I think, a huge win. Januaries tend to be really slow in the SaaS world. Our pipeline is looking much better than I think that it has been in the past. We brought in a new VP of sales who's really helping us with that. And mostly, but the numbers are just one thing, right? I feel like it's the energy around conversational AI right now and how people want to use conversational interfaces that is really exciting to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't have to explain it so hard anymore. I don't have to paint a picture that people can't see anymore. And I was spending so much energy on that like last year and the year before that. And now I don't have to do that. Like people understand it now. It's already all that education work I had to do before, I don't have to do anymore.
Yep.
And so we can ride on that momentum. And so I feel like this actually takes a huge amount of load off of my day-to-day like evangelism that I'm constantly doing. So, obviously, are there things that I wish were different? Of course. We always have so much we need to get better at. But in terms of like where we're directionally headed, I've never felt better than right now.
Amazing. This was a blast. I want to end with one final question. And typically we blanket these questions for all entrepreneurs, but I want to do something different. I want you to share your best piece of advice for a young woman aspiring entrepreneur who wants to potentially start a company.
I would say to, first of all, pursue what you believe is of interest and where your passion can really follow. Because I think if a person isn't following what they really, really believe in and what they really want to be doing, anything they do will just be a flop, really, or it'll just fall flat in a sense. And ASU students ask me this, well, how did you get to where you are? And I just said, honestly, I just followed what I thought was interesting and what I wanted to learn about. That's all I did. And then I applied myself like crazy to it. So it's the combination of like passion and application. If those two things are done, then you can find those entry points to success. But without either of those, you can have passion but no application, and you can have application but no passion, right? But it's like those two things have to be working together in harmony in order for those opportunities to really be available to us, and then for us to take best advantage of them. So that's what I would say to anyone.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. That's a wrap.
Thank you, Tyler. It's been great being here with you today.
Thank you for joining another episode of the Rollercoaster podcast. Really excited that we had Rebecca Clyde on this episode. And the key takeaways from this episode were, number one, if you're a VC, you should be backing women because their performance speaks for itself. It tends to be better than men, so back women. Number two, make sure you're building your company for the right reasons. If you're going to start a company, don't make it about money. Don't make it about monetary or finding more time or these sort of things. Do it for the right reasons and figure out what those are for you. Number three, be supportive of yourself. It's important to have a support network around you, but what's more important is that you look within and that you deeply support yourself in the decisions that you're going to make to start a company. Number four, if you have a family and you're an entrepreneur, that's a benefit. That's a blessing. Bring them along for the ride, because to find the right balance, this is one of the secrets to making sure that you can maintain that. And lastly, passion plus application equals success if you're looking to start a company. Thanks for joining another episode. We appreciate it. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.